He said, إذا قاتل أحدكم أخاه فليلتقي الوجه فإن الله خلق آدم على صورته. He said that if any one of you fights their brother, then let them avoid hitting the face, because Allah created Adam on his image, i.e. on Adam's image, for example. Yeah. So the point is, like, combat sports, which focus on punching the face and stuff, are not recommended. You could say are haram even in Islam. Now, I'm not saying. Yeah, well, not in the image of God, in the image of Himself. Allah created Adam directly. Or if you want to say that He's taken some of the attributes of God in His own way, but not in the way that resembles God's attributes in any way, shape, or form. So the point is, it should be. I mean, I'm not saying that if someone attacks, someone, you can't punch them, you can't defend. But I'm saying that for me, anyways, personally, I like grappling sports. I mean, I think it's a bit more. The problem with grappling, yeah, it's technical, but the grappling sports, your joints are more at risk, but your mind and brain isn't. When you're doing a lot more, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do striking. You should do striking to pads and this and that, and even like some light situational stuff. But when you do that a lot and you get a lot of hits to the face, it can mess up your brain. And if one of your life objectives is to try and acquire knowledge,
it's not going to help.
It's not going to help, so it can't. But also, one more thing is that I don't know why I'm talking about this. Oh, is it recorded?
Yeah, it's recorded.
Oh, all right.
Just some tips, but yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, this is my. I do believe that a good grappler in most case scenarios will be a good striker in most case scenarios, and the UFC has shown us that. I think Anyway, sorry. I mean, but obviously Roger Gracie got knocked out by
I don't know.
King Mo.
I don't really know anything about it. I don't.
Yeah. Anyways, so.
To do that, you need meat.
Yeah, you need protein.
But you're a vegan, right?
I am, yeah. So what do you think about veganism?
Well, I mean, look. I mean, I've seen lots of studies that I'm not an expert in. I'm not a nutritionist. I've seen lots of correlative studies with meat and, for example, cancer. I think the first one I've ever investigated was something called a China study. I'm not sure if you're. Which was highly controversial, but which was quite interesting as well. I think, from an Islamic perspective, obviously meat is not prohibited. There are some interesting ahadith, like for example, there's a hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ where he talks about the cow, and he says, "Fi lahmiha da' wa fi shahmiha dawa," or something to this effect, which means in its meat is a kind of disease, and its fat there's a kind of cure. Now,
so it's kind of like balance.
Not necessarily. It could mean that eating too much. It could mean that eating too much beef, which is going in line with the China studies, will give you disease. And the Prophet in his life was more of a flexitarian, so he did eat fish. He wasn't a pescatarian. He had some meat, but he was more. I would say he's more a flexitarian.
But it's more about gluttony. I think that from what I've read in the Quran, one of the things I was given is that it's more about not over-consuming anything. So it's not the overconsumption of meat. So eating meat 3 times a day or meat products 3 times a day. It's about sort of balance and moderation.
I looked at this book. I was interested in this topic. There's a hadith book.
Yeah. What is a hadith, by the way?
Okay, right. I think we need to go straight to basics, right? There's Quran and the Sunnah. Muslims believe in 2 things. So the Quran we believe in it's actually the literal word of God. It's the literal word of God. It's a communication from Allah, God, the Almighty, the All-Powerful, the All-Knowing, the All-Wise, to the Prophet, Muhammad, in this case, who would then disseminate that information, that revelation, to the rest of the people. Okay, so that's what the Quran is. It's really a guidance. It's a huda. Guidance meaning in all of our daily lives. It's a comprehensive. We actually I'd put to you that Islam, it aims to. It's basically we would say it's a comprehensive way of life. It's all comprehensive. So in other words, it discusses the micro up until the macro. There's even the political, to be frank, right? That's why some people, because the verse in the Bible it says to Jesus, onto Jesus, whatever to Jesus, and onto Caesar, onto Caesar, or whatever it is a little bit alien to the Quranic narrative. The Quran is فَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Whoever does not rule by what Allah has revealed, then they are the disbelievers. Allah says in the Quran, you know, فَوَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِيمَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُم. They don't really believe until they make you the judge between their disputes. ثُمَّ لَا يَجِدُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَرَجًا مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. And then they don't find any problems in their heart about your judgment, and then they completely submissive. So I was listening to Jordan Peterson and his criticisms of his supposed criticisms of Islam. I was seeing what he was saying. I'm not sure if you know who Jordan Peterson is.
I do, yeah, I know him very well.
And his criticism of Islam was that he believes that Prophet Muhammad was he keeps saying a warlord, okay, or someone who was, and then he tries to make a comparison with Jesus Christ and says, well, look, this is not the way Jesus was, okay.
Well, I think one of the things that you've got to look at is you've got to look at the context in which, if you call somebody a warlord, he's a warlord in what context? If somebody is persecuting against you and you fight back, then if you're on the side of the persecution, you call them a warlord. But if you're on the side of the person that's being persecuted, you'd be a freedom fighter.
And absolutely, that's a good point, but I want to take it further than that. I want to accept the assumption.
Can I interrupt you just for a minute?
Yeah, of course.
Bought some food for you guys.
Oh, Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much.
Please make dua. It was for a brother and sister got married.
Perfect. Can you keep it in your bag until I finish, inshallah? I was going to be cheeky and ask for a drink as well.
We didn't bring drinks, but
No, I'm only joking. Thank you.
maybe it would be appreciated because do you think it's a good idea? Because
Yeah, could be.
I'd like to do that. And
Yeah, no,
when they come
definitely,
down,
this is
just
good.
eat some chicken,
Yeah,
chicken and
it's from the
pasta.
sunnah, but this guy's a vegan, so he can't eat any of that
No,
stuff.
just for some of the brothers that are here all the time. I mean, it's all day long. It's a way of contributing.
Alhamdulillah, thank
Getting
you.
some of the.
Jazakallahu khairan.
For it.
Thank you.
My name's Alia.
Oh, mashallah. Thank you. So,
What a nice lady.
look, I want to be frank.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson,
Yeah.
he classes himself as a nominal Christian or something like this, right?
Yeah.
And so he's a Christian. Obviously, he's trying to compare Jesus with Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
The fundamental flaw in that is that the premise is completely shifted. It's different. Our premise is not a libertarian or a liberal premise. That must be understood. We don't believe liberalism is an objective truth. It's a political philosophy, but a lot of, like I've seen Sargon of Akkad as well. You know this guy on YouTube. Sargon of Akkad, he came on the, I might do a video responding to him. Jordan Peterson, all of them, they kind of, do you know what they are? I've realized exactly what they are. Their criticisms of Islam are valid. Wait a minute, what did you say? Yes, it's absolutely valid. Considering the one following principle, that they have a post-enlightenment libertarian premise. If you have that premise, if you believe that liberalism, the political philosophy liberalism, is an objective truth, okay, then Islam is contradictory to that in many ways, in my opinion. I'm not going to say that they're wrong about that. However, the problem is that does not imply falsity or falsehood. Now, if we're talking about truth, it's different to talking about aesthetic value judgment. Now, with Sargon of Akkad and Jordan Peterson, what they do is they focus on things like aesthetic value judgment. So they'll say, okay, because I'm a liberal, or they wouldn't even consider themselves a liberal, obviously, Jordan Peterson on the right side, but in a sense, he believes in freedom of speech and these things.
I don't know if I put Jordan Peterson on the
No, he's
right
not.
side.
I'm not saying he's a left wing.
Okay.
I'm saying that he believes in post-enlightenment principles of things like freedom of speech, which of course are begotten of from a philosophical liberalism. Yeah.
But I think one of the things about Jordan Peterson is it's important to consider because you pick up on what he talks about with Islam.
Yes.
But you can comment on him when he talks about people who are ideological in general in a dismissive manner.
Yeah, he's against. Oh, hi. He's against what he calls collectivism. Now the thing is, once again, why are you?
Identity politics.
No, I'll ask him a question. I mean, if I was with him, I'll say to him, what's wrong about collectivism? Now, if he says it leads to separatism or communism, no, but he hasn't put an argument against Marxism.
One of the things is that you're onto quite a good point because if he's against ideologues, so ideologues coming together to an ideology. One of his main things is he talks about the failure of society, especially to men, because of lack of community. And that's
No,
one of his
I
main
like
things
some of
is
his
that-
analyses on feminism. And stuff. I think he's done a good job. But once again, this is the thing. Jordan Peterson is an excellent psychologist. Yeah, he's really good. However, when it comes to political philosophy or philosophy in general, I feel like there's an elephant in the room that he's not handling or that he's not addressing, which is how do you justify your premise or your presupposed premise? He's standing on an argument, right? And the argument is this is not in line with Western values. Okay, I agree with you. Now what? How do? So if we agree with that,
he's very anti-identity politics, and so he wouldn't.
Yeah.
He wouldn't align himself with like a guy like Sargon of Akkad, for example.
Yeah.
Or ethno-nationalists like Tommy Robinson. He would say what
Tommy
you're
Robinson
doing
is not worth discussing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to bring that up. But
Yeah.
you kind of have to put that name out there.
Yeah.
But the problem is that he represents identity politics because it's British culture, whatever that is, understood to be.
Absolutely.
Versus Islam. And Jordan Peterson is saying, don't engage in identity politics because you're not going to get anywhere by doing that.
Well, that's the thing. Say that's his presupposition, right? Saying, okay, let's not be collectivist because you're going to do this. And you go, okay, no problem. I want you to do something more fundamental than this. I'll say to him, can you tell me why it's wrong or false? Saying Prophet Muhammad is a warlord doesn't make being a warlord wrong. In fact, you can use that word, which has negative connotations in the English language, transform it into a political general, political leader, or a successful political leader, and completely change the way people perceive things. By using the word warlord in the English language, we know that the connotations are deeply negative. Now, what does he mean by a warlord? Because the expansion of Islam was for the most part after the Prophet Muhammad's death, but under his instructions through what we would call the divine command, to some extent expansionist in a lot of cases. I accept, no problem. I accept that in the context of the medieval empires, that there was permission given to the Islamic empires to be somewhat expansionist.
So
now the question is,
So when you use the term like expansionist,
yes.
I've got an understanding of what you mean by that, but how would you define expansionist?
In the sense that there was three options offered to rivaling empires. The three options were that you either become Muslim, you stay in your own religion, but you have to pay the jizya, which is jizya. No, but I'm not even gonna say. I'm saying what I'm saying is this. Or that they can stay with their own religion. The Quran says you can't compel anyone to be a Muslim. Now, but the point I'm making is this: that was a government-to-government thing. So, for example, as I said to you, no one can convert anyone because in the Quran, chapter 256, this is where it says there's no compulsion religion. So there is an overlap between philosophical liberalism and Islam. But what I'm saying to you is that, in the context, is the question I would put to him. In the context, and I believe you me, I am absolutely confident. I'm totally confident to the highest degree that he will have absolutely no answer to this whatsoever. Or Sargon of Akkad or anyone. I'm so completely confident. The question is this.
Conviction is the word.
Convicted. Or not convicted, but I have
You've got the
complete certainty, utmost conviction. Okay? What I was going to say was that let's assume, this is the question. Why is it objectively wrong to offer, or let me rephrase the question. Why is it objectively wrong to be somewhat expansionist? Because there are some things which are not. I'll tell you what these things are not. In the context of medieval, what in international relations is referred to as realist framework, a realist framework, which is that really power is defined as the struggle between empires. An empire's primary goal is to try and expand. And that if you don't expand, you'll be expanded upon. Now in that context, or any context, forget about that context, even today, I'm asking the question, say for example we had an Islamic state, or any state, not just an Islamic state, an American state, an empire. Why is it wrong to have a policy of, I'm not going to say expansion, but I'm going to say expanding the influence? Now, whether that be politically, militarily, or whatever, now you can say, well, it's not wrong. We have nothing to show that you can say it's against the Bible. I say, no, it's not against the Bible, actually, in fact, right? So what evidence do you have that this is a wrong thing to do? There was no evidence.
I see where I see your point, and I think that when somebody, whether or not Jordan Peterson has that view, being expansionist is wrong. One of the things that you've got to look at the picture as a whole, and you've got to say, okay, so if Islam is expansionist, and if an element of that people will say is aggression,
what I would say,
the flip side. So if you look at Western culture, so you can make a case for the US being expansionist in the Middle East through the acquisition of oil assets in Saudi Arabia and the former Ottoman Empire.
Yes. What I'm saying is this, right? I think we think too much on liberal. I genuinely, the presupposition is a philosophical liberalism. I don't accept that presupposition because I don't believe philosophical liberalism from Thomas Hobbes to J.S. Mill, or even let's say beyond. Let's say until I would say until John Rawls. Because he's the last major liberal scholar, in my opinion, major scholar that's probably studied in universities and PhDs as well on him. That breadth, I don't believe that the scholastic tradition of liberalism is an ultimate truth. So if I were to ask Jordan Peterson or Sargon of Akkad, can you prove to me? And I say, okay, it's not an ultimate truth. We accept it. We agree. So why is every argument you make premised on a philosophical liberalism? Because if we take away that carpet under your foot, you're going to have to start by telling us why philosophical liberalism should be adhered to. Now, I'm not saying that these guys are left-wing, because people might confuse, using some kind of equivocation, the liberalism with a small L with the liberalism with the big L, or whatever it may be, or left-wing politics. I know that Sargon of Akkad, I don't know where he is actually on the spectrum, but I know that what do you call him? Jordan Peterson is not left-wing. I know that. But he's inherited a post-Enlightenment dogma.
No, but I don't think you could classify him as left or right wing, and I think that's one of the things that people do in order to
I think you're right about that.
Try and discredit him, because I think that really he's as a psychologist, all he wants to do is better. He wants to better the people that he treats. Let's say in his practice, somebody comes to see him, he wants them to help improve their life. So he wants to have a better quality of life, be happier with what they have.
Yeah.
And I think that, with his success on YouTube, the platform that he's been given, although the initial comments that he made about gender neutrality and saying, I'm not going to use those forced pronouns or whatever they are, even though that was the first thing that sort of gave him the limelight, that's not what he's about. He's about...
I would just kind of say that, look, I was saying that a lot of, what I would put to these individuals, to people like, what I would put to someone like Sargon of Akkad or these individuals is that they speak as if post-Enlightenment principles which were adopted societally by, let's say, the world that we live in now, are working in contradistinction. And I would put to them that actually they're working in contradiction to one another. Now, I'll give you a few examples of that. Freedom of speech. I've heard Sargon of Akkad say that he's a freedom of speech absolutist. And I would say that that's a ridiculous position to hold. It simply is a ridiculous position to hold. The reason why is because if you say if you're an absolutist, the word absolute indicates that you actually would endorse something like, for example, someone revealing the secrets, and these are the classical examples, of a poison gas, a new poison gas, putting it on the internet. Or let's even say, what about child pornography? Because freedom of speech and freedom of expression are sometimes interchangeable. What about, for instance, we just saw a kid walking by now. What if someone in a school context was racist to a child and was bullying a child using freedom of speech as a guise? Most people in society will say that's not acceptable.
This is one of the problems, is that you've given individuals like that. So Jordan Peterson, I wouldn't involve him in this side of things, but you've got people with people that you can label as right-wing, whether or not you call it far right, or, however, that's your choice. But right-wing nationalists who've latched onto freedom of speech as an excuse. Before that wasn't their motive. Their motive has always been a kind of a protectionist, nationalist stance. And they're using freedom of speech because it's a hot topic, and you can almost use that to legitimise.
Absolutely. And everyone knows, every democratic, civilized, and I put that, society has certain limitations. For example, libel, plagiarism, copyright, trademarking. All of these are embedded in the social infrastructure, and to be honest with you, they haven't tackled that. They talk freedom of speech. The kind of freedom of speech Jordan Peterson talks about is the one is the kind of freedom of speech that leads to the pursuit of truth, the kind of freedom of speech that J.S. Mill talks about. But that kind of freedom of speech is different to the absolutist freedom of speech, potentially, that Sargon of Akkad could be talking about. The point being is that they use these slogans, these post-enlightenment dogmatic slogans, and I'm not saying just because it's dogmatic, it's wrong, but they use those slogans in order to kind of preach to the choir, as it were, in my opinion, the Western choir, that have already accepted the democratic principle that there are no disadvantages, or that democracy or liberalism is an ultimate truth of some sort, or the ideal philosophy that we should be living by, and they're preaching to that particular choir. Oh yeah, of course. So that's what I think. The point being is, what needs to be challenged is the presuppositions.
Yeah.
Now, when we have a discussion, and it has to be frank, we have to look at, for example, those guys. I've mentioned those two because they're quite popular, but also because they're quite critical of Islam.
Yeah.
I started off by saying that their criticism of Islam is valid, but on what premise? On the premise that they accept philosophical liberalism as the truth. For example,